our bill introductions. I do have a bill introduction. It is RS 21 RS 0642. So I move the bill introduction. Is there a second? It is an act concerning wildlife relating to the lifetime hunting, fishing, and fur harvesting licenses, Kansas Air or Army National Guard veterans. Second by Representative Hoffman. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? All right, bill is introduced. Any further bill introductions this morning? I think Representative Sutton will have one in 5 minutes. Oh, you'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay. Any other bill introductions? All right. Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and open up the hearing on House Bill 2174, which is establishing the Rural Hospital Innovation Grant Program to assist rural hospitals in serving rural communities. So I'll now turn it over to the revisor's office. Jill Walters will give us a bill brief. Jill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Scott Abbott with the revisor's office. I'll be handling the bill brief today. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, committee. House Bill 2174 was sponsored by this committee. For members returning to the committee from last year, it may look familiar as it is substantively identical to last year's House Bill 2522, as that bill was amended by this committee. As the chairman mentioned, the bill would establish the Rural Hospital Innovation Grant Program to strengthen and improve the healthcare system and access to healthcare services in eligible counties, those being other than Douglas, Johnson, Sedgwick, Shawnee, and Wyandotte counties. The program would be administered by the Department of Health and Environment. Grants awarded under the program would be for the purpose of providing transitional assistance to hospitals in an eligible county, including changing the hospital's current healthcare delivery model to a model more appropriate for the community. That type of assistance includes a market study of the community and the healthcare services needed, acquiring new technological tools and infrastructure, and acquiring the services of appropriate personnel. Under the program, an eligible county would be able to apply for a grant from the program and would include in their application a description of the hospital that would receive the grant money, a statement of the amount of money requested, and a description of the needs of the hospital and any other information required by the secretary in the application process. The secretary would then enter into a written agreement with the county to require the county to expend the grant money to provide assistance to the hospital, and would also require a report to the secretary within 1 year detailing the effects that the grant money has had on the hospital. It would also require the county to repay all grant monies if the county failed to satisfy any material term or condition in the agreement, as well as would allow the secretary to impose any other terms and conditions deemed necessary to administer the program. The bill would transfer $10 million from the State General Fund to a newly created Rural Hospital Innovation Grant Fund for the purposes of the program. Any grant awarded under the program would require a match for every $1 of state monies with $2 of money pledged by a private stakeholder. It would also allow some mechanical and procedural issues to allow for memorandums of understanding and written agreements to facilitate that public-private match. The program and the fund would be established upon the bill's effective date, July 1, 2021, and would expire on July 1 of 2025. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to stand for any questions.
All right. Thank you, Scott, for giving us a briefing on House Bill 2174. Committee, do you have any questions for Scott? All right. Seeing none, thank you again. Well, we'll move on to the first individual that I have as being a conferee in regards to House Bill 2174, and that would be Deborah Barnes with the Kansas League of Municipalities. Deborah, welcome to committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Deborah Barnes. I'm a staff attorney at the League of Kansas Municipalities, and I'm here to give proponent testimony for House Bill 2174. It's not often that the Appropriations Committee gets a 3-for-1, and this is the case here. You're going to be having matched funding for the grant fund for this enterprise. Rural hospitals are so important to our cities all over Kansas, and quite a few of them are having difficulties and really having a struggle. This grant fund is one part of the puzzle piece to try and give them an opportunity to better match their offering to the community with what's needed. When rural hospitals do struggle, it has, whether or not the city owns the hospital, a great effect on the community. People may decide not to settle there, not to take up employment if they can't get the right sort of health care. So it's very important to be able to get the right match. And this program should help on that front. Whether or not the city owns the hospitals, and there are a few hospitals that are still owned by cities, many cities are very closely involved with their hospitals. To give you some examples, Fredonia, which does own the hospital, they have been giving $400,000 a year, the proceeds from a 1% citywide sales tax. Another example is Wellington, where the proceeds from 1% sales tax has amounted to $650,000. So you can see that the cities and the hospitals are very closely aligned. And it's for that reason that I would like to suggest that the bill be amended to allow cities to have the same opportunity to access the grant program and the grant funds as counties. And I have taken the liberty of attaching some suggested language that would bring that about. So what I'm saying is that a city in an eligible county should be allowed, just as a county, to come forward and to put up an application for a grant. So that means just some adjustments in the language to allow that to happen. And I would ask the committee to think about that as they consider the other testimony they hear and as they work the bill. And with that, I stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Barnes, for being here. Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. I just had a quick question on the cities. Do you think that was just an oversight, or was there a rationale for not including them?
I suppose, well, this is how the bill came out last year, and there are many programs that are administered by counties, so I think it's just something that hadn't really been thought about before.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions for Ms. Barnes in regards to House Bill 2174? All right, seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
The next conferee that I have is Tara Mays, the Vice President of the Kansas Hospital Association. Tara?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
Very good. Well, good morning. I am Tara Mays with the Kansas Hospital Association. Thank you for allowing me to appear before you today to testify on the benefits of House Bill 2174. I do appear before you today on behalf of our association's 122 member hospitals. Hospitals in rural parts of our state face many unique challenges. Some of those might be stemming from the evolving demographics that we know occur in rural areas, from reimbursement reductions, or from heavy regulatory burdens that can contribute to added costs significantly. We know that rural hospitals face these tough challenges and that requires a kind of perseverance and innovation that can really only come from our state's unique and very highly talented rural communities. Those financial losses that I've mentioned have placed a heavy burden on our state's struggling hospitals, and just like a lot of rural Kansans, our hospitals take very seriously their responsibility to provide core community infrastructure services to the people in their communities that they serve. It's in that spirit that keeps our hospitals very committed to keeping their doors open and serving those patients in the right ways at the right times, no matter the challenges that they face. Our hospitals have been seeking new and innovative ways to ensure that they are providing quality of care that the rural Kansans can count on, and certainly House Bill 2174 and the work that you all have done within House leadership and on this bill has been very helpful in that area. One way that we at KHA have been assisting our members in developing innovative alternative rural health models is by having community conversations to emphasize that the most care that people most seek and are desired in those communities can be a focus. Those services that we hear are most sought after in rural communities really do center around preventative and primary care, chronic disease management, and emergency medical service. The new model that we've been talking about, the primary health model, allows for local hospitals to serve as access points to coordinate the overall care if higher levels of regional care become warranted. This model has been discussed before this committee and before the previous Rural Revitalization Committee in years past, and we are happy to report on how House Bill 2174 and its funding elements really do fit quite well with the policy provisions that are contained within House Bill 2261, which is keeping Kansas hospitals serving the communities that depend on them. Since KHA last appeared before you to discuss how the Rural Innovation Grant Program can be a key to the success of the rural healthcare model, we have seen some significant movement that makes now the perfect time for Kansas to take a lead role in establishing how we can keep these struggling hospitals serving our Kansas communities for years to come. After many years working with our federal delegation, we are pleased to report to you that in December of 2020, the version of the CARES Act that passed had a very similar plan to what you all have discussed in the past, which is now called in that bill the Rural Emergency Hospital Model. The federal legislation requires state legislation to allow for that designation to be aligned and to implement the new payment and delivery model where it might make sense for any given hospital in any given community across Kansas. As KHA, we've begun the process to engage communities across the state in conversations about how this model might be an important tool in the tool belt for hospitals that might be struggling financially. House Bill 2174 that's before you today establishes the Rural Hospital Innovation Grant Fund, and it could be a tremendous asset to us in assisting to analyze and prepare for this new model of care delivery in communities where that might make sense. Our healthcare systems across the state are all their own unique ecosystems, but they are intricately intertwined between regions and throughout our state. While this bill is aimed at creating an opportunity to leverage private funds to benefit our state's rural hospitals, those benefits are experienced across systems and across our state. We are happy to appear before you and urge your support of House Bill 2174, and I would be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Tara, for being here. And in regards to the bill, I think it includes all counties in the state of Kansas with the exception of 5. Is that correct? You're nodding your head.
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And I guess also in regards to hospitals and rural parts of the state of Kansas, do we have a number of hospitals? First, I guess, what would be the definition of struggling? And then 2, how many of those hospitals fall under that definition of struggling?
Mr. Chairman, it's a very good question that you bring up. I think we have several different studies that we can point to that have kind of defined it in different ways. It's hard for us to put a finger on exactly what the definition of struggling is, because what it might mean to one community, it may mean something very different to another community. So unfortunately, I don't have a number to give you of what is financially struggling, but we do have some studies that analyze kind of the vulnerability that I'd be happy to pass along to the committee if it might be helpful.
All right, thank you. Committee, any questions for Tara? Representative Helgerson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In reading the bill, it seems that this is a county directed. Is there anything that prohibits multi-counties going together to form a regional plan?
Tara?
Yeah, so the way that we read the bill, it does not prohibit multi-counties. I think there's even a provision in there to allow multiple units of government, whether that be cities or whether, as Deborah mentioned, that be counties, to be able to go together to do that.
So then an area could develop a regional health care plan for that specific area outside those 5 counties.
That is our understanding.
I see you nodding, so. All right. Are there any advantages then to have it more directed as opposed to individual regional proposals, to have it more directed from the state level so that we have a comprehensive, continual healthcare plan for the state that reaches to the local rural areas developed by them. I'm looking at if this makes sense for a county, it also makes better sense to have several counties join together to develop a healthcare plan. Then it makes also good sense to have a statewide plan developed from the grassroots up.
Wow,
Not to put you on the spot, but you know.
Well, I think you raise a very good point, Representative and Mr. Chairman. If I may, I think, yes, a statewide approach would be ideal. In the interim, we see some significant benefits to having local communities be able to take a local approach to solve some of these problems as well.
Thank you. This is not my idea. This is actually a former lieutenant governor of the Republican Party under the Graves administration. He and I had talked around and kicked this idea around, and that's why I'm throwing it out. It might make sense to take some of the ideas from a past administration and to include it into this bill. Thank you.
Any further questions for Tara? All right, I'm not saying any. Thank you for being here. The next conferee that I have is Taggart Wall with the City of Winfield. Taggart?
Good morning, committee. Mr. Chair, hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Great. Speaking for the City of Winfield as a proponent of this bill, it actually, as you can maybe see in the background, just so happened I had an occupational therapy appointment at my local hospital here in Winfield this morning, and I told the gentleman that unfortunately I also had to present testimony before the House during this appointment, and he said, "Oh, what a better time." So here we are. Point being, we would respectfully request an amendment that would allow this bill for cities to apply as the applicant jurisdiction, as stated earlier by Ms. Barnes. Each city is different, each community is different, and so we each have our own challenges. I'll give you an example. In Cali County, there are 2 major hospitals. The bill as written may present some obstacles as far as getting the money directly to these communities, basically making the county pick and choose between the 2 hospitals. While there is some reason and some support for what a previous representative spoke about of having more of a regional approach to healthcare plans, I will say that each community is drastically different. I've served in Sterling, I've served in Arkansas City, I've served in Winfield. In one community, it might be physician recruitment. In another community, it might be emergency room or urgent care services. In another community, it might be a surgery center that is the issue at play. Each community truly is different, especially in these rural settings. And so we would ask that cities be allowed to be that point of contact as the jurisdiction applying for monies from the grant fund. To give you an example, we just raised $4.6 million for a surgery center expansion here in Winfield. All of that was locally raised. Our hospital is not supported by sales tax or other local property tax like some other community-owned hospitals. And so this gives us a chance to say, hey, we're going to go privately raise $2, pick up $1 from this fund, and be able to do much more for our local community with our healthcare priorities in mind. I appreciate your time and consideration.
Mr. Walton, I guess the first question that I would have is, it seems like it's an overwhelming amendment change to the bill and to include cities to apply for the grant. Do we know how many rural hospitals would fall under that category?
I would have to defer to Ms. Barnes. Unfortunately, I don't have that answer for you.
We can get that answer later on. Committee, any questions for Mr. Wall? All right, seeing none, thank you for being here today. The other testimony that we received is from John Donnelly from the Kansas Farm Bureau. He has written testimony in regards to House Bill 2174, and that is all the individuals that I have wishing to testify in a proponent position in regards to House Bill 2174. I am not showing any opponents or any neutrals. So at this moment, I'm going to close the hearing on House Bill 2174. All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and move into the next item of the agenda. And I'm going to preface that we do have a State Finance Council meeting this morning scheduled at 9:30, so I will be stepping out for a while. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chairman Carpenter of the Social Services Budget Committee, and that is in regards to the hearing that they had in regards to the Executive Reorganization Order 47, which would be renaming the Kansas Department of Children and Families, the Kansas Department of Human Services, and abolishing the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services, and transferring all functions to the Kansas Department of Human Services. They held a hearing in regards to this ERO on Monday, and they also had a decision in regards to how to move forward with the Executive Reorganization Order. And so right now I will turn it over to Chairman Carpenter, who will give us a detailed briefing of exactly what was discussed on Monday in regards to ERO 47. Chairman Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Monday, February 8th, it was late. I imagine the hearing probably started after 5. We did have a hearing on the ERO 47.
Chairman Carpenter, is your mic on?
Yes.
It is.
Maybe I need to talk a little. Okay. We did have a hearing on ERO 47 on Monday evening. It was late. We had 3 other budgets that we had heard that day. And we had testimony from Joe Walters from the Revisor's Office. We had testimony by WebEx from Leslie Anderson, Executive Director of the Kansas Area Association Agencies for Aging and Disability. We had in-person testimony by Secretary Howard. We had in-person testimony from Kyle Kessler from the CMHCs and Sean Gatewood, CanCare Advocates Network. We had written testimony from Matt Fletcher, Interhab, Lori Alvarado, DACA, Linda Bass, KVC, Rachel Roosevelt, Family Initiative, Colin Thomasette, Chief Operating Officer, Family Services Guidance Center, Denise Seisman, CEO, Community Care Network of Kansas, Jill, I don't have a clue how to pronounce that, Assistant Administrator, Douglas County. They were all proponents of the ERO. And with that, I did make a motion to disapprove the ERO, and it passed 6-2. I'll stand for questions.
Committee, are there any questions? Representative Hyber. Representative. Whatever his name is. Yeah. Representative Helgerson, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. You had 6 proponents, I think. That was the notable, and you had no opponents?
Well, are you talking about testimony?
Yes.
Correct.
Was there any discussion why not to do it? You know, what I'm trying to understand, what are the arguments against doing it and for the committee's vote? All the testimony was in favor of it, and yet there was a motion to do just the opposite of what everybody testified about.
Correct.
Was there financial reasons? You know, what did you get a fiscal note that said that this would cause a great deal of cost?
No, we had testimony from Secretary Howard, and it was sent out to the committee. Basically, same song, different day. Same ERO. The juvenile justice program was taken out of it, a $40 million price tag, basically combining these 2 agencies. There's very little fiscal savings whatsoever, maybe 500,000 in the out years. And that's about it.
Did anybody testify against it?
No.
Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I kind of had the same question. So there were, I see there were 9 proponents on it, and it was, I remember last year, the heartburn was because the juvenile justice was in there, and I got that. There didn't seem to be any problems with the rest of it, and so the compromise, as I saw it, was struck. The juvenile justice piece was taken out, and so what we were left with, which something I thought was fair, because one of the reasons I remember last year to do this was by combining them, you reduce some of the barriers to service, and people don't have to navigate multiple agencies, and they can come to one place. So it appeared to me, from everything I learned last year, was this made it easier for the constituent to get these services, especially when there's transportation issues involved and all that. So I am too trying to figure out, with all these proponents, no opponents, and the compromise, how did we get to a no? And maybe it would be helpful if we heard testimony in this committee, because I have to admit I'm scratching my head on this one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I don't think it's uncommon to not go with proponents, and even if you have all proponents. There are very many reasons, lots of reasons not to combine this organization. We heard from the folks that there are a lot of problems with communication currently. We heard, and execution by both agencies. I personally, and the committee, doesn't believe that that will solve those issues. So I believe that the Secretary has the latitude to make a lot of these changes without combining a $2.1 billion agency with 300 employees, 289 employees, with a $780 million agency that has 2,600 employees. I have never seen, and I will never be convinced that by making an agency larger that they will be more responsive to the people that they serve. And everybody in this room knows that's a fact. So that's what I'll tell you.
Thank you very much. And really not to be argumentative, but I probably don't know that. It appears that this would improve the communication. And I truly can't get past that 9 of these organizations that probably have clients that deal with this on a regular basis were all for this. So, and there were no opponents. That's just hard for me. I probably trust most of the people on this list that they would have pretty good input of how the system works and how this could be improved. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I'm obviously not on the social services budget, but Secretary Howard did come by and we had a good conversation on this. And what my comments were to her, I see a benefit and a need for combining some of our programs more than I do just combining 2 agencies together. And I think if we are wanting to move forward in, you know, as some of the comments made here today about improving services, making things more accessible, more things under one house, we need to look at how do we take and perhaps come in and combine some of the different programs that we have between the agencies. One of the frustrations that a lot of people deal with is they don't realize that Medicaid is in 2 agencies. KDADS has authority, KDHE has authority. One does something, the other one can't counter what's gone on with it. To me, that's never made sense that Medicaid is sitting in 2 different agencies for these programs, because then you don't have the left hand and the right hand talking together. So this is why I explained to her my opposition to the ERO, And I would be happy to sit down with her and any others that wanted to discuss how we could look at the various programs that perhaps do need to be combined to provide, I think, better access, better services, and more accountability. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I think along those lines too, even from last year, this is the same. Nobody's ever came to us and said, here are these barriers that we have, that why we can't communicate better, why we can serve. No one's ever said that. And I've maintained all along, the secretary is the secretary over both agencies. And I have not been shown anything that she can't do because she's the secretary over both these agencies to make this happen.
Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I confess I'm a little bit at a loss, along with Representative Helgerson, on if no one from the public or who interacts with these agencies thought this was a bad idea. That, to me, we're not being very respectful of the public testimony and the hearing process if we're going to throw that out the window. I'd also push back on the idea that combining these creates, in any sense, larger government. We're still talking about the same number of employees and essentially the same budget. To me, there are efficiencies in having that all under the same roof. This may be an imperfect analogy, but a couple of my committees this year are split into multiple rooms just to accommodate social distancing. I don't think anyone who serves on those committees would say that we are more efficient because we have smaller groups of people, isolated in two silos. Yes, we have the ability to communicate through that, but I think we all prefer being together under one room and being able to work together. And I know that's not a perfect analogy for this, but we're not increasing the size of government. We're not adding new employees. All we are doing is letting the services of those agencies function in their most efficient way. I'll be sad if we miss an opportunity to create a better interface for the public. I think one of the most appealing aspects of putting these two together is the idea of having a hub in which our constituents can access services they need and be connected to the right resources. So I guess I'm just express a little disappointment in the vote of the subcommittee and some hope that perhaps with further discussion in this committee, we might be able to move what seems like a good policy forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Helgerson.
I'll wait till they finish because it's going to be directed at the two of them. I'm going to step into it, and I don't mean what you're thinking of. We're all friends at some level in this committee. And all of you know my history. I go back to Bob Harder, who had basically all the power, and Brenda does too, all the power basically in one person. I don't know what is the perfect solution to having the departments combined or not combined. I do know, though, and this is where I'm going to step into it and get another call from the governor's office, that if they haven't done a good enough job with the two chairmen in convincing you and spending the time having a dialogue with you over the last year, then that fault lies with the administration, okay? That was part of the information I was trying to look for. But I'll also say that if we're rejecting it because it's a Democrat proposal, that's a poor way to start our session because we got some real big issues to deal with that are going to come down the pike. And I think it's good for the administration to take some time, and not that you want my assistance, but since I've sat in your chairs previously, I can tell you some of the benefit of having one committee, having it consolidated and on one, but I think they owe you that. And we trust the two of you to make many of those decisions and to lead us, this committee, in a certain way. And if they haven't convinced you, I think that they need to do that. And I hope you two will be, you two and all of us will be open to further discussion on this, because I think historically we always give, whether or not it's Hayden, Graves, Brownback, and I can't remember the rest of them, we always give them the opportunity of reorganizing a little bit to make it to have their footprint together so they can succeed or fail according to their plan on the agencies. So while I can read the writing on the wall, I hope that we will not necessarily close the book on this, but that we keep an open mind so that if they can come in and gather additional conversations with you to convince you a different way, that you'll be open to that.
And I appreciate that, Representative. I think I have been before this committee plenty of times to prove that I'm apolitical when it comes to supporting the citizens of our state, much to the chagrin of a lot of the budget guys here, you including. You know, so I don't think that's it at all. But as I've said many, many times over this thing, I'm not interested in doing it just to change the name. I want to see concrete results, examples of what we're going to do and how we're going to make it better for our state. It's that simple. It doesn't have anything to do with being a proposal from the governor or anything else. It has to do with making things better. And until the secretary convinces me of the things that she can't do right now, by working together and executing better between the two agencies, which she is the secretary over both of them, then I'm going to continue. Okay.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of tag on to that, Representative Helgerson, Representative Carpenter and I try to kind of stay in communication with each other because of the things that kind of cross our committees a little bit. And then I think he's been very respectful of my background in the area of the social services budgets as well. And I know that in our conversations, there was never talk about who the governor was, because I'm like Representative Carpenter, I don't really care, because I don't serve the governor. I serve constituents in the 105th District in the state of Kansas. I wasn't here when the Department of Aging and whatever was all, put into KDADS. I do know that when I came back, I seen a mess. But I've not had the time to really sort out what that mess is and how it needs to be cleaned up. And I think that that's where Representative Carpenter, and I don't want to be putting words in his mouth, so he'll freely stand up and say, Brenda, you're wrong. That it goes back to looking at the programs, and that's exactly the conversation I had with Representative Howard. And I have a lot of respect for her. I've worked with her for a lot of years in a lot of different agencies. That woman does not have a political bone in her body. She operates because of the best interest of things. So even though we disagree, I think she even acknowledges a little bit that if we could take the time and dive in deeper and decide long-term of what needs to be combined versus just combining something for the sake of whatever, is the wrong path to take. We already did that when we created, when KDADS was created by the legislature. So if we go into it program by program, look at the agencies, like I said, Medicaid in two agencies creates a lot of problems because they're counterproductive sometimes. And then we're watching this one over here, but the expense is sitting to our left, and you're like, dang it, I didn't catch that one because I wasn't watching that agency. So I think it's further discussion, but I hope that people don't look at it that it had to do because it's a Democrat governor, because I can guarantee you that Representative Carpenter and I don't care, and I think Representative Ballard could support my opinion on that.
Representative Ballard.
I had to call her out my name.
You were okay until you called my name.
I'm only asking you to agree on my respect for the D or R. I don't care. I'm not asking you to agree on.
Thank you. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. And as you know, I've sat here quietly and haven't really said anything. But Representative Landwehr did give me an introduction. And I would agree, as far as fairness is concerned, and certainly I've worked with you. And certainly I've worked with Representative Landwehr much longer, so I mean, I can verify that. But I don't have any concerns really with Representative Carpenter as well. I was not surprised with the outcome because I kind of figured it was not agreed upon. However, I have to comment on the procedure. And really, since Monday, I have been very uncomfortable with the procedure. And I think you all know I'm very big about procedure. I don't call people out. I don't do any of those things. But this procedure was just disappointing. First of all, on the agenda, it says we were going to have a briefing on ERO 47. I think you all know the weather was bad. I have not attended any of our meetings by Zoom or WebEx, but I did this one because really I didn't have anything but that one 3:30 meeting. And so did Representative Susan Reese. Representative Lindsey Bond came in. I won't dispute anything that happened during the meeting of who testified and who gave testimony and everything else. I stayed the same. I did make comments towards the end to indicate that I had been through 3 governors, lots of EROs, and everything else, and I saw where a lot of things had worked well, a lot of things didn't work so well, but in my estimation, that the rejection of this last year was because of corrections, because that's what we heard the most about, and that I would be in favor of approving it. I think we had one other testimony. Now, this is the procedure now that I'm disturbed about. As soon as we closed the briefing, not a hearing, and nothing indicated that we would be forwarding any opinion that day. Immediately after we closed the briefing, and it pains me, it really does. The chairman immediately, without any discussion from any of the members, made the motion to reject it. And there was a question because I had said, would they not like to be reported as a no because I disagree? Susan Reese said the same thing. Then there was a comment made by another member, well, if you're not in the building, you can't vote, and whatever. And it was not a bill. It was a briefing. The chairman said, well, I was going to allow the voting to take, everybody to vote. So Jill Walters stepped in by saying, we were asked to report on ERO to appropriations. And so therefore, that's how it's left. So then a question was asked, well, what was the vote? Because it was not a show of hands and no one really said anything. And the response was it was 6-2. Well, I didn't know we were going to be reporting it out. And at that point I said, Representative Vaughn has been here through the whole meeting, and she left. Well, I found out later Representative Vaughn had conferred with the chancellor, with the chair, to see would it be okay if she left, because when she came in, she was, she almost had an accident, and she wanted to leave before it got dark so she could drive back home, and was told, no, yeah, no problem. Well, then she was upset and wanted to talk to me about why did we have a vote to pass it on, when she was told, no problem. I mean, it didn't say there was going to be a vote taken and pass it on or whatever. So, I'm pretty realistic. I didn't think it was going to pass. And it more than likely would have been 6-3, because the 3 Democrats on the committee would have supported it. But if you just see the procedure, it was very, very uncomfortable. And for me, it was very, very disappointing, because I have always, on this committee with each of the chairs, had a working relationship that was comfortable. And up until that procedure, it has always been comfortable. I just thought it was unfair. And I had thought about it, and actually I wasn't sure I wanted to even say anything about it, because I don't like to be negative, but truthful I am. And it was very disappointing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, can I respond to that?
Chairman Carpenter.
Thank you. And I agree. It was not the best situation, quite frankly, to hold a hearing. This whole year, quite frankly, with COVID, WebEx, and all that kind of stuff has been a problem. And if there's any problem, it's us having 15 days to respond to this ERO during this kind of situation with the weather and stuff like that. We're up against a timeline. We did some things that we had to rush just to make that timeline. Do I like it? I don't. But the gain or whatever, disproving this was more important than that. Representative Vaughn asked me if it was okay to leave because she didn't want to have a car wreck on the way home. I'm not going to say, no, you can't leave and be responsible for having a car wreck on the way home. End of story. That doesn't mean that much to me. So I didn't figure it was going to make any difference in the vote, but I did say that, and I'm not going to ever say that to anybody that fears for their life that they can't go home because we need to take a vote. So with that, I'm not happy with the situation, but we were up against a timeline. I couldn't postpone it because of today's hearing was already scheduled. I was out for a funeral yesterday. It was just an unfortunate set of circumstances that I don't enjoy either, but that's what you have to do sometimes.
Well, and I would just also reiterate, that we had the same conversation last year when we talked about the ERO in regards to the combination of DCF, KDADs, and also at that point it has also had some juvenile justice items included in the ERO. And there was some discussion last year when we had the hearing, and then we voted to disapprove that on the same day. And Jill, if you want to chime in, you may, but an ERO is different than a bill. A bill has to sit until we take final action. An ERO does not, and we can take action immediately on that after the hearing. Jill, did you want to say anything else?
No, sir. I just would be here for questions, but no, I have no comments.
All right. Any further discussion in regards to the social services budget recommendation in regards to ERO 47? Seeing none, Chairman Carpenter.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would make a motion to disapprove ER 47 and introduce a House resolution to disapprove.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion to disapprove the ERO 47, seconded by Representative Landwehr. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion passes, and ERO 47 is disapproved. Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to request that my vote be recorded.
So moved. Also, Representative Brett Parker, Representative Carlin, and Representative Ballard would like to have their votes recorded.
Alcala also, please.
All right. Thank you, Representative Alcala, and also Representative Alcala.
Burrows.
And Burrows.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the budget report outs by the General Government Budget Committee. So I will now turn it over to Chairman Sutton. And if you'll please tell us which budget you're going to be reporting out first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now that we have the boring stuff out of the way, let's talk about some budgets.
And which one are you going to be starting with?
I'm going to start with the judicial branch. That'll be in volume 2, page 1135.
All right, thank you. I was just going to make that comment.
Thought I'd start with this one since we've all got our fires lit. That'd be fantastic. (1135) in volume 2. And I left my glasses at home, so Stephen, you may have to hold this at some point. Everybody ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Excellent. All right, for the judicial branch, year 2021, the agency requests a revised estimate of $150.5 million, including $112.1 million from SGF. The revised estimate is an all-funds decrease of $797,000 below the approved amount up by the 2020 legislature. The decrease is primarily due to lower employer contributions for the public employees retirement system and the judges retirement system. The revised estimate also includes 1,868 FTE positions, which is the same as 2021. The governor recommends $153.5 million, including $111.6 million SGF in 2021. The recommendation is an increase of $3 million, or 2%, above the 2021 revised estimate. The governor statutorily is required to include the judicial branch's budget in the governor's budget report as submitted. That should be noted by everyone. The recommendation includes 2 adjustments that are not reflected in the 2021 revised estimate due to the statewide adjustments. First, the recommendation includes an additional $3.5 million, all from Coronavirus Relief Fund, to further remote technology equipment and program expenses for 2021. The agency used that supplemental funding for personal protective equipment, temporary support to address growing information technology needs, and funding the existing specialty courts, creating an online marriage license portal, which was awfully darned handy, and creating a text notification system, and as well as creating a virtual court directory. Second, the recommendation includes a reduction of $525,000, all from SGF, for a moratorium on the death and disability payments. We've seen that before. However, because the judicial branch is a separate branch of government, legislative action is required to effectuate that change. And the House committee agreed with the governor's recommendation for 2021. I sense a question.
And actually, I'm going to hold my question until you go through fiscal year 2022, because I'm looking at some of the data in the budget book, and I'm going to ask you about that when you go through fiscal year 2022.
Well, and Stephen will do his best to answer you.
Committee, any questions for the chairman in regards to fiscal year 2021? If not, We'll go ahead and move on to fiscal year 2022, and then I'll ask my question.
Excellent. All right, for 2022, the agency requests $175.6 million, including $138.9 million from SGF. The request is an all-funds increase of $25.1 million, or 16.7% above the 2021 revised estimate. The increase is primarily due to the agency's enhancement requests for salary and new court services officer positions. Absent the enhancements, the request is an all-funds increase of $524,000 above the FY21 estimate. The non-enhancement increase is primarily due to employer contributions to CAPERS, the judge's retirement, and group health insurance, offset by lower professional service fees for the web-based e-court system, which is finally rolling out, by the way, and by the equipment replacement expenses incurred in 2021 that are not present in 2022. The request also includes 1,938 FTE positions, which is an increase of 70 FTE positions above the 21 revised estimate. We'll get to that in just a moment. The increase is, oh, never mind, we'll get to it right now. The increase is due to this agency's enhancement request for new CSOs. Let me get to the governor. The governor concurs with the agency request. Again, because it's a separate branch of government, the governor passes on whatever is submitted by the agency. The House Budget Committee recommendation. The Budget Committee concurs with the governor's recommendation for 2022 with the following adjustments. Add $250,000, all from the permanent families account of the Family and Children Investment Fund, for court-appointed special advocates, and transfer that amount from the KEYS fund to the permanent families account for 2022. We do that every year. The difference is that this year it's $250,000 rather than $200,000, but historically we have always made that transfer from those funds. We just raised it a little bit this year. The Budget Committee recommends the agency's enhancement request of $9.4 million for a 25.4% salary increase for judges and justices for fiscal year 22. Included in the governor's recommendation, we ask that that be retained. We do note, however, that given our current situation, the cost of phasing in these salary increases over 3 years, beginning in 2022, would total $3.1 million per year for a 8.5% increase each year. The Budget Committee recommends the agency's enhancement of $10.8 million for salary increases for non-judicial employees, included in the governor's recommendation. The Budget Committee notes the costs of phasing in these salaries over 2 years, beginning in 22, would total $5.4 million per year. And finally, the Budget Committee recommends the agency's enhancement of $4.3 million and 70 FTE positions for additional court services officer positions, included in the governor's recommendation. The Budget Committee notes the cost of phasing in these new positions over 2 years, beginning in 22, would total $2.2 million and 35 FTE per year. I imagine there are going to be some questions regarding this, and I appreciate that. Let me start off by saying, however, that the CSO positions, that third one, is kind of our fault. We've been adding more and more programs, diversion programs, substance abuse programs and treatment that rely upon CSOs. And without them, well, it's almost like an unfunded mandate. We have passed on responsibilities to employees that don't exist. So we're trying to make up for that in this budget, get the 70 people that are, according to the court's research, required to fulfill their statutory obligations. And I will be happy to stand for questions. And Mr. Wu, take it over.
All right, thank you, Chairman Sutton. And actually, you answered the question that I had when you were going through fiscal year 2021, and I was looking at the budget trends on page 1139 as to the 24.5% increase in the budget request from fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 2022. Obviously, this is something that we have discussed in this committee over the past few years in regards to the pay increases, and that is, I think, the direct reflection of the 24.5% increase between 1 year, correct?
Well, in addition to the new CSOs, but it's the lion's share of it, yes.
Yeah, the majority of it is the pay increases. You know, when we received the governor's budget in this committee, when we had the joint meeting with Senate Ways and Means, obviously, one of the prerogatives that she had in her budget was a 2.5% increase for state employees. Like I said, we've had, even when I was general government budget chair, we were having discussions in regards to pay increases for the judicial branch. However, when we look at a 25.4% salary increase for judges and justices, I don't think that sets a very good example of having a stark increase with those individuals as opposed to other state employees. So I would actually make a motion that we will have a pay increase for all of the employees of the judicial branch, but it'd be the same as all other state employees across the state of Kansas of 2.5%. So that's a motion that I have. Is there a second? Second by Representative Hoffman. Discussion. I can see that you want to say something, Chairman Sutton.
I do. I see where you're coming from, and certainly appreciate it. The optics of that sort of a raise going on in a year when we've put businesses out of business is terrible. I'll grant you that. A 2.5%, we've done a couple of 2.5% and 5% pay increase over the past few years. That really amounts to about a cost of living adjustment, and that's fine. That's keeping us treading water. But there were 9 years, and I have to say I was a part of it, in which there were no raises. And one could argue that there were circumstances warranting that sort of position, that sort of direction. However, those times are over. There's been a change in the Supreme Court. There's been a change in our legislative body. And we don't have a school finance issue anymore. So it seems to me that it's probably time to make up for some of that 9 years and actually gain ground rather than just to continue to tread water. And that was the position of the committee.
Well, and I will say in the last few years, I mean, Representatives Hoffman and Wolfmore can attest to this, that the House side has continually put more money in towards pay increases specifically for the judicial branch. And when we get into conference with the Senate, we come into an issue in regards to that. I am just saying that if we're going to look at it, and especially in the times that we're in right now, I think in all degree of fairness for the state employees, it's a 2.5% increase and not a stark 25.4% increase for judges and justices. Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you are right that the Senate is not as supportive of this. And so that might be one reason why we would want to come with a pretty good offer, because we're probably not going to get a lot of it when we get to conference committee. We've seen that. You know, we heard just extensive testimony. It was one of the best presentations I believe I've heard about the state of the judiciary. And Representative Sutton is right. From 2010 to 2018, those 9 years, there was 2% raise. And so it's become a crisis point. Our clerk 2, that's entry level, even though it says 2, clerk 2 makes $13 an hour starting salary. In my neck of the woods, you can go to Amazon and immediately start at $15 an hour. we have gotten ourselves so out of kilter that we are not able to attract those employees. And some of the testimony we heard from around the state, it is at a crisis level. And in fact, what they said in some cases, some of them are making essentially what they made in 2010 when you consider that healthcare's gone up and CAPERS has gone up. And so it's just not working. I think you have a mismatch between the duties and skill required and the pay that they're given. And as long as we have that mismatch, we're going to have a terrible crisis. So I just have to say it was an impressive presentation, and I do fully support this. I know it's a amount probably that some people aren't comfortable with, but if we're going to solve the problem, let's solve the problem and not just barely nick it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just say one thing. You mentioned that we do not have a school finance problem now. We maybe don't have one in the court, but we are putting in upwards of $100 and some million new money into the education system every year that does impact our budget. So I would disagree that we don't still have a school finance issue.
If I could correct myself a little bit there, you're exactly right. What we don't have is the Supreme Court serving as the Appropriations Committee for school finance. And that's really what I was getting at there.
Representative Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've been working on foster care issues for about 3 years. And, you know, through the years when we talk in appropriations about funding the judiciary, you know, we've tiptoed around this and ticky-tacked a little raise here and there. But as the chair mentioned, we've kind of done this to ourselves with having inability to retain positions, inability to attract quality candidates for positions. And who are we hurting? You know, we're not hurting, if you're trying to hurt, you know, the Supreme Court, we're not hurting them. We're hurting Kansans who are not having quality, efficient court system across our state. And while we talk about that in generalities, I can go back to specific foster children who are not represented well, who are in front of judges that don't understand adoption law, maybe. I'm thinking of specific cases where I've got a notebook full of stories where people have called me and shared with me. I mean, what we're doing, and Mr. Chairman, I completely understand the whole idea of trying to keep things fair across the board with state employees. But this is a system that's struggling and it's affecting other areas of the state. And I was given the task this fall to have this foster care oversight committee and look for where we have gaps and weaknesses. And I'm telling you, this is one of them. This is one of them. And if we don't take care of it now, we're going to push it off to another year or spread it out. We're not taking care of these kids that we're responsible for. So, Mr. Chairman, I would make a substitute motion that we follow the direction of the committee and fully fund the judiciary.
Committee, you've heard the substitute motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Carlin. Discussion on the substitute motion. Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I honestly agree with what practically everybody is saying in this debate. You know, I believe that 25.9% across the board this is probably not the year to do that, but I also do believe that we've got a serious issue here, and I'm not sure 2.5% is sufficient. I don't know where the middle ground is on this, but I know that judges and their staff are the cornerstone of our legal system in the United States. I mean, we're a country of law, and regardless of what we do across the nation, you know, it costs money to get good people to serve in some of these positions. Again, I don't know that I feel kind of in a quandary here. I'm not sure I can support 25.9% this year, but I sure know there's a bigger problem than 2.5%. And I might ask a question of the chair. I know last year we had a plan that passed out of the House for the judicial system. And do you know, it was like a 3 or a 4-year phase-in or something like that. Do you remember any of the specifics of that? I know there was another chair at that time.
Oh, right. Being in this committee, in this particular committee, I do recall it. That included the items 2 and 3 for the judicial employees and the non-judicial employees, and it was amortized, if you will, over 3 years. It was a 3-year phase-in. I believe, and this is just going by memory, that there was also in that request additional judges, but I'm not sure that made it out of committee as I'm thinking back on it now. But anyway, for items 2 and 3 on the budget committee recommendations, those were spread out over 3 years last year.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And though I hear the plea, I hear the agency's recommendation, I cannot support this. The average salary for judges nationwide 2019 was $121,000. I look at page 1,145, and I see that we want to take our Supreme Court from 149 to 187, chief judges from 144 to 181. And the only one on the list that's lower than the average of our U.S. judges would be the district magistrate judges. I would support looking at the clerk's pay and raising that so that they can provide for their families and they're more competitive and maintain stable employment. And I would be okay with some kind of equitable compared to other employees that are receiving a 2.5. But 25, when we've got $300 to $700 million of fraud going out that we as Kansans will pay. We must pay that back. And with businesses having to carry that load, they will have a tax increase. 60,000 businesses across Kansas will have a tax increase because of that. And we are seeing businesses and retail stores closed all over the place. Amazon's doing great, but our brick and mortar businesses are not. And to give a 25% raise, I don't care if they had 9 years without. They're still doing better than the average in the U.S. So I oppose this. It does not look good, and we could have provided a better, more incremental, equitable solution. Thank you.
Well, and the only thing that I would say in regards to that is, yeah, we not only did the judges and the justices and also the non-judge staff not have a raise for 9 years, also all state employees did not receive a pay increase over those 9 years as well. And that's why I think it's more equitable to treat all employees of the state the same and not have a 25% increase for one particular degree of employees for the state. Representative Burrows, did you have a question on the original motion or the substitute motion?
Mr. Chairman, just to comment, and you just hit on what I wanted to bring up was in reference to this does affect all of our districts, as we well know. And I believe we're referring to, maybe it was called the Hayes study back years ago. It just shares with you the time I've spent listening to pay increases, not only for our state employees, but for this particular agency included. But it has been quite a while that we've even brought salaries up for the state, our state workers, and we know the challenges that we have in recruiting people. We've affected their pensions and their benefit plans, and we continue to go down this road of we might want to do something later. If we don't do something now, it's going to cost us even more. And I have to say, I'm really pleased that the chairman of the committee, and I've been ranking member of this committee for a number of years until this year. The chairman of this committee really worked hard with the committee to get a consensus as to bringing this issue forward, knowing the amount of debate and discussion we would have. The importance and significance of this discussion is once again to educate our committee as well as those across state that we're taking this issue very seriously and do understand the financial implications it has on the budget, but doing nothing is not what is what is needed here. And the 2.5% raise for state employees, our state employees are still below the curve. And I'm supportive of the motion that the committee put forward, or the position the committee put forward by our chairman. So I would ask that the committee members give serious consideration to the action we're taking on this budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Burrows. Any further discussion in regards to the substitute motion? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I've learned a lot from my colleagues on this. If I may, to the chair of the Budget Committee, we've talked about the percent increase. What percent do we have for judges and the other staff? You said part of that was for those additional positions, trying to get a handle where we are on that increase, and if there was any discussion about bifurcating once again the non-judicial staff.
That could, thank you, Mr. Chair. That could very easily be done by accepting 1, 3, and 4 of the committee recommendations. The increase for the judicial staff, judges and district court judges, amounts to $9.4 million. The non-judicial is $10.8 million. And then what I think is an absolute requirement is for the CSOs, that's $4.3 million.
Representative Johnson.
So thanks for that. And if I was quicker with a pencil that I seem to leave at my office or a calculator, maybe what the percent is on those increases. And I don't think either of the motions messed with the court services officers, if I heard them correctly, that those positions would be added?
No, it's just in regards to the pay.
So
I believe so. Is that correct, Representative Kincannon, with the substitute motion?
My motion was to fully fund the positions.
So the positions are included in the substitute motion. The underlying motion is just reducing that to a 2.5% increase for all positions in the judicial branch. Any further questions in regards to the substitute motion? Representative Ballard.
Thank you. I think we've bounced around on what the courts should get, especially the clerks, and I would agree that the clerks probably need more, but I think across the board, I can support as well. I know it's a tough swallow, but I think at some point we have to realize that they really need compensation as well. Thank you.
Any further discussion in regards to the substitute motion? Seeing none, Representative Kincannon, you may move your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is not a 24% pay increase. It's a 24% increase in expenditure. And part of that is filling 70 positions, 70 CSO positions. I mean, as was mentioned, this is This is absolutely necessary that we fill these positions because of changes that we have made in law, that where we need those. And in my opinion, we cannot just say it's the non-judicial. We need judges. We need quality judges. Out in my neck of the woods, there was a magistrate judge position open, and there were 3 applicants. And probably the most qualified applicant was the secretary for the district judge. I mean, there's just no competitive pay that where someone would take a step out. You know, they may have to take a cut in pay to go into public service, but I mean, it's not even remotely close. And we have had situations that were reported to us that were absolute missteps, where we cannot get quality people in those positions. And once again, we can talk generalities, but I'm talking a particular case and particular children that have been impacted from this. So I would ask for you to support this motion, and let's get the ball rolling on this. We may have to deal with the Senate with some discussions, but I think our position needs to be that we need a quality, effective system throughout our state. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll move my motion.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the substitute motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? No. I'm going to call division. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. That's what I'm trying to pull up. Who's on WebEx?
Yeah,
All right.
sure. I was going to sit out unless it was tied.
So we have 3 on WebEx voting in favor. We have 9 in the committee room. Opposed? I'm showing 12 in opposition. Is that correct? So the motion fails on a vote of 12-9. We're back on the original motion. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if there is something that another representative spoke to earlier in terms of a middle ground that looked at particularly the court service offices, maybe as far as the magistrate judges having an increase larger than 2.5, but perhaps less than 25% in the year of 2022. I wonder if any such discussions might have come out of the committee to either a lower amount or a separation of groups that might guide us further on that.
Mr. Chairman, there was extensive discussion, as you can probably imagine. The happy middle ground that we came upon, if it wasn't possible to fully fund it, which we recognized was a very real possibility, the happy middle ground was to phase in the judicial salaries over 3 years, to phase in the non-judicial salaries over 2 years, and also to phase in the CSO positions over 2 years. Now, the discussion on the CSOs was a little bit different. It wasn't a matter of just wanting to spread it out. We really just didn't anticipate that 70 positions could be filled within this fiscal year, and so splitting it up over 2 years just made sense. But that was the discussion that we had in committee, and that's kind of what we settled upon as a not so bad second effort.
not knowing the fiscal note, I'm toying
Well,
with.
I can provide that.
Okay.
To spread out the judicial branch would be 9.4 million per year, or 9.4 million in 2022. For the non-judicial, it would be 5.4, so we're at 14.8 right there, and then 2.2 for the CSOs, so it'd be right at 17 million.
So if someone else is thinking of making another substitute motion, I'm thinking of dealing something where.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. Let me correct myself.
Thank you.
It's not 9.4 the first year for judicial. It is 3.1. I took the total amount, not the 1/3. 3.1 plus the 5.4 to make 8.5, and then, so it would be 10.7.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'm thinking of considering is if we were looking at 2 or 3 years, looking at an increase of half to a third to half on the non-judicial, whether or not to include the magistrate judges would be a question. And if indeed we couldn't hire all of the court services positions, I'd be okay slowing it down. But otherwise, I think we were generally in agreement to leave that part alone, and then look at starting at the 2.5% increase on the judge positions above that as a starting point. But I'd be curious to hear other discussion.
Well, I think for a point of clarity, in regards to the vote for the substitute motion that just occurred, let's go ahead and there's been some confusion on the tally on that. So again, in regards to the substitute motion that I just declared that failed, who voted in favor of that substitute motion? And raise your right hand. Six. 7.
I raise it just a little bit, is that okay?
And then we have 3. So in favor was 10. Those opposed? Those opposed are 12. Okay, so that vote in motion failed. Okay, back on the discussion. And I just wanted to have that for clarity because we've been having some discussion in regards to that. So
are we back on the original amendment?
We're back on the original motion made by me. Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this one here? Sorry, that's awkward. So I just would like to mention, and this has to do with Representative Concannon's concern, is that the 70 CSO positions I'm in favor of. And last year, the House passed a bill 120-5 that said that judges could order CSO officers to be involved in child in need of care cases. And they do that mostly in Sedgwick County and Wyandotte County because they have very heavy sink cases and they need those court service officers to keep things moving. And so I don't think we have that bill on the table this year, but my question, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman, is there a way to, I mean, I don't understand the proviso procedure yet, and so I'm asking, is now the right time to ask that a proviso be put in to say that these court service officers that we are hoping to fund may be used in sink cases, and courts may order CSO officers to be in sink cases, or would that be something that we do later on?
I'll go ahead and answer that question. And just for everybody's knowledge in regards to how provisos work in the budget bill, and Jill, if you're on, please correct me if I say anything incorrectly. The proviso is only valid for the years of the budget. So if we want to make something long-standing, it needs to actually be a statutory change. Yep. It can happen as far as a proviso, but just keep in mind that when a proviso is included in the budget, it's only valid for the years of those budgets, and then it's negated when those budgets are through.
Yes.
So the process of either having an amendment to the budget or a proviso to the budget, one, can happen now, can happen when we actually debate the budget here in committee, or it can be added on the floor, and it can be added when we're in conference. So that's the process. I just want to make sure everybody is aware that a proviso is only valid for the years of the budget.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. And part of the angst of passing that last year was that they were still short 70 positions, and maybe they wouldn't have enough in sync cases. So if we pass this, I feel like it is maybe a bridge that we could have CSO officers in sync cases, and then next year make it statutory. But we didn't bring it up this year because we knew that there was a shortage of CSO officers. So if we do pass this and fund those extra 70 positions, then I would request that the court is able to instruct CSO officers to be used for child in need of care cases.
Representative Williams.
Okay, well, I do have a couple questions. Number one, I just noticed in our book on page 1145 that, you know, the judges, they're asking for a 25%, and they say it's market-based, and then the other salary increases are only 2.7 to 18.9. And regarding the CSO, it is mentioned on 1145, so wouldn't that be, so just for clarification, so that we for sure include what Representative Humphreys is saying, it's number 4 on the recommendations. So does that also include what Representative Humphreys just stated? Because it is on page 1145. It mentions the CSO.
I would say in regards to the motion that I made, it was just making a change to any salary enhancement to 2.5%.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, the 4.3 million for the 70 FTE positions does not reflect a salary adjustment.
Correct.
There will not be wage compression if number 3 of the Budget Committee is not passed. Those are strictly for new employees.
Yeah, so the intent of my original motion is not to do anything with number 4. It's just changing all salary enhancements to just a 2.5% increase.
Okay, so then in that case, Mr. Chairman, that's the motion that's on the floor, and then the number 4 could be a separate motion if the committee so desired, correct?
It's actually not any part of the motion, so it would be part of the Budget Committee's recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm just trying to follow the dots here. So on 1145, if we look at this, you have the 9.4 million for the judges, 10.8 million for the non-judicial employees, and then 4.3 for the new 70 FTEs. Is that correct, Chair Sutton?
That is correct.
Okay, so that puts us at $25.5 million. And we've had discussions over the years, and I believe that I was part of a motion at one point that we would fund our non-judicial employees with a pay increase. And we were told, if I recall correctly, that even if we just said that we would pass X number of dollars for the non-judicial employees, that the judicial branch could decide to put that pay increase anywhere that they wanted to. We can't necessarily specifically say it has to be non-judicial positions. I do understand what Representative Concanon is talking about, and it's one of the things that, you know, having issues with judges, and especially in our sync cases, et cetera, that we're pretty blessed in Sedgwick County, the fact that we do have elections. And that has helped us, I think, a lot in addressing the problems that we've had in the court, because enough noise gets made that people hear what those concerns are. It's hard to swallow all of this, Mr. Chairman, when we've got people that have lost their businesses, their homes, and their jobs. We've got other areas in the budget that we're not funding. One that comes to the top of mind, because I read the article on it this morning, was $8 million not being funded for the brain injury waiver expansion. That's an $8 million expense today, but you know what that is later on when we don't do that money? Try several millions, maybe even hundreds of millions, because now you're talking about long-term care facilities for these individuals. And right now, the expansion population are children. So it's, for me, it's about us prioritizing. Now, in the past, Mr. Chairman, we have kind of taken salary increases as a global issue, and I would like to see us do it at this time here so that we can have that discussion after we've seen the other budgets brought in and what's in those budget. So unless there's an objection, I guess I'd make a substitute motion that we remove all of the salary increases in this budget. I don't think I can touch the other ones yet, and make it a global issue to be discussed when we work the big bill.
Committee heard the substitute motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Francis. Discussion on the substitute motion. Representative Owens.
Just wanted to clarify on that. Does that, are we specifically addressing in the substitute motion the new CSOs?
Representative Landwehr, your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, it would be all salary increases so that, and that we can address it at a later time when we work the big bill. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, can we have the motion in this budget here that it impacts all budgets, or do we have to make that in each budget as it comes into us on the
No, actually, you
salary?
could have it be a global amendment to review all pay increases when we work the budget bill.
So I can make that at this time?
Yes.
That's exactly what my amendment said, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
So you want to change your original motion to include all budgets?
Yes, I do.
So, all right with the second? It's okay by the seconded. Representative Francis.
So just make sure I understand kind of a little bit. We're saying that we're going to pull all the wages out and then we'll look at them globally at the end. So there is the hope that when it's looked at the end, that there would be more than 2.5% possibly for certain agencies based upon need.
Of Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that would be my point, because like I said, I'm not opposed. We've heard discussions in this committee before that, and we know it happens in Sedgwick County. We actually have a food pantry in our courthouse, and that's primarily for our non-judicial employees, and that's kind of sad that occurs. So I've never had a problem with funding the non-judicial. And I know that some people say, well, Brenda, it's because you have a problem with the Supremes. Well, no, it's not, because I'm telling my friends, and I have a lot of friends that are judges in Sedgwick County, I'm telling them no to their faces when we have conversations. I don't make this decision based on decisions that have come out of the Supreme Court. Representative Sutton is correct in that we do have a new Supreme Court. I've had some great conversations with our Chief Justice, and I'm looking forward, for how things will progress in the future. But it has specifically to do with the fact that we're going to have limited funds, and we know that. We need to see what's in the needs in these other budgets. Like I said, that $8 million in that brain injury waiver is huge. Representative Ballard and I think we're probably one of the few two, maybe Representative Helgerson, when we first put the brain injury waiver into place. We expanded it here 2 years ago, I believe it was. And now the big population is we're seeing the kids. So it's just move all the salaries, not to say they not give it, just to set it aside. So it's global talked.
Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify something. So if we give money to the non-judicial employees, the reason it's a range, and I forget what it is.
Some of them are high, some of them are low. It's like 2.9 to 18 or something like that.
We can definitely designate where it goes to non-judicial employees. The reason it's worded like that is it allows them to manage properly, and they know where they need to give a smaller raise and they know where they need to give a larger raise. So it's giving them the pool of money that they can use for non-judicial, and we can designate that to make sure it stays in that pool. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Estes.
I just wanted to say that if this motion fails, I plan on putting forth a substitute motion that we take 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the committee report individually.
And the only thing that I would say in regards to substitute motion, and as many of you know, in previous years, I probably would have supported the substitute motion. This year, when looking at all the budgets, it seems like all of the other agencies and departments have pretty much adhered to the governor's recommendation of a 2.5% increase. So that's already affixed into all of the budgets. But there is a difference in the judicial branch. And I think just for uniformity, that's why I made the original motion to have all state employees across the board, regardless of agency and department, to have a 2.5% increase just for uniformity. So if it comes down to it and I vote, I mean, I would rather have the original motion because it's already embedded in all the budgets and for the agencies and departments of a 2.5% increase. And we'll just be debating this when we do the budget bill. So any other further discussion? Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification on this motion, so we have a lump of money. It's not going to get put into a 2.5% increase, but the agency, quite frankly, is going to be able to target that to move it where they need to.
Can you restate that, please?
Well, for instance, we're looking at K&I. Their bottom rate is $12.35 an hour. Are they going to globally, if they get a 2.5% increase in salary, all of them, it's not going to make a bit of difference. They need to target that starting rate to get that up where they can hire people.
Well, and that's the reason why I was saying right now, embedded in all the budgets is a 2.5% increase for agencies and departments. And if we take this out, when we start doing the debate on the budget bill, you can make a case because I know you're going to be, well, you're supposed to be reporting K&I today. Probably we're not going to get to that.
You're welcome.
And we can have a discussion, and we have a discussion in regards to each particular agency and department. But as it stands right now, I mean, the governor's recommendation is all state employees get a 2.5% increase. And we can individualize every single budget and talk about employees here and there. But I mean, right now, that's just the standard blanket policy that was recommended is a 2.5% increase for state employees. And that's what the original motion does. It doesn't change item number 4 in regards to the budget recommendation from the committee. It's just talking about the salary increases. And so that would be a 2.5% increase. But any further discussion on the substitute motion? Seeing none, Representative Landwehr, you may close.
Close.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it. We're back on the original motion. Representative Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we take individual votes on items 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the Budget Committee report.
Committee, you've heard the substitute motion to take a vote on items, make sure I have this right, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Independently.
Individually. Is there a second? Second by Representative Johnson. Any discussion on the substitute motion? All right, seeing none, we'll see how this works. I'll make sure Jill is listening so she can tell me if I'm doing this wrong. Representative Estes, you may close.
I close.
Okay, so the first vote is going to be on item number 1, which is adding.
Vote on the substitute motion first.
Do what?
I believe we have to vote on the substitute motion first.
Jill, what is the process when we break this out to 4 different items?
Mr. Chairman, this is David Weiss with the revisers. Yes, the vote to on the substitute motion needs to occur first, and if that is adopted by the committee, then you can take each of those items separately and have votes on that. But
all right, thank you, David. All right, and thank you, Chairman Sutton, for the clarity.
Didn't mean to step on your toes there.
That's fine. Okay, so in regards to substitute motion, all those in favor of taking items 1, 2, 3, and 4 and voting on those individually, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? All right, motion passes. So the first vote is going to be on item number 1, to add $250,000 from the permanent families account of the Family and Children Investment Fund for court-appointed special advocate programs and transfer that amount from the Kansas Endowment of Youth or the Key Fund to the permanent families account for fiscal year 2022. All those in favor of item number 1, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's the budget recommendation. Opposed? All right, item number 1 passes. Item number 2, the Budget Committee recommends the agency's enhancement request of $9.4 million for a 25.4% salary increase for judges and justices for fiscal year 2022, included in the governor's recommendation, be retained. All those in favor of item number 2, say aye.
Aye.
We had discussion on the substitute motion. No. Opposed?
They slow played that one.
Let's see, who voted on WebEx? Okay, so again, those in favor of item number 2, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm going to call division. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I would ask if discussion is in order on each of the motions that would be before us.
Well,
with the possibility.
and I was having a conversation with Kathy Wolfmore, or Representative Wolfmore, in regards to that. And David, correct me, and I may be wrong about this, because this is kind of a new territory of breaking everything down. Discussion would have happened on the substitute motion. Do we need to have discussion on every single individualized item?
Mr. Chairman, that is up to your purview to allow discussion on.
I would say it's up to my purview that we've had enough discussion in regards to this, and so we're just going to vote on every single item. Okay, so roll call vote on item number 2. All those in favor, raise your right hand. And this is in regards to item number 2 on the Budget Committee report for fiscal year 2022 on the $9.4 million for the 25.4% salary increase for judges and justices in fiscal year 2022. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, so the vote is 9 total with 3 individuals on WebEx. Those opposed, same sign. $12 or $13? 11. 11 voting in opposition. So item number 2 fails. Number 3. The Budget Committee recommends the agency's enhancement of $10.8 million for salary increases for non-judge employees for fiscal year 2022, included in the governor's recommendation, be retained. And the Budget Committee also notes that the cost of phasing in these salary increases over 2 years, beginning in fiscal year 2022, would total $5.4 million per year. All those in favor of item number 3, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. They do have it. Item number 3 passes. Item number 4, The Budget Committee recommends the agency's enhancement of $4.3 million and 70 FTE positions for additional court services officer positions for fiscal year 2022, included in the governor's recommendation, be retained, and the Budget Committee notes the cost of phasing in these new positions over 2 years, beginning in fiscal year 2022, would be $2.2 million and 35 FTE positions per year. All those in favor of item number 4, say aye.
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 Opposed? Item number 4 passes. So just for the committee's, knowledge is that items 1, 3, and 4 on the substitute motion passes. Item number 2 failed. Representative Johnson.
And number 3 is phased in over 2 years?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's what it says. Representative Sutton.
Mr. Chair, there might need to be discussion on that because the actual Budget Committee request was to fully fund. We just noted that the phase-in would be a lower amount should the committee choose to go that route.
That's not how I think the vote was, but it was stated. But, I mean, it passed this committee, so the way it stands right now. Representative Wolfmore.
So just to clarify, Representative Sutton is correct. That's what we intended in our committee. So are you saying that it is the full amount, not the phase-in?
From what the vote was in this committee, yes, it is the full amount.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative
Chair.
Buchanan.
Point of order, sir. That's not the way it reads. And we voted on this on how it reads.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
I
it
agree.
just, it says, the second line is the budget notes the costs. They're just noting it. And that was the intent, and the intent was the first paragraph, that it's funded. I mean,
What I said.
It was my impression that it was going to be over 2 years. And from the Budget Committee's recommendation. Now,
So
keep this in mind, that whatever passes out from the General Government Budget Committee recommendation and what we had just voted on in here, when we have the budget discussion, we will reopen all of these items and have further discussion at that time. It's just going to cascade into the budget bill, and we can have further discussion at a later date when we're putting the budget together. I mean, this issue is not over. That's what I'm trying to say in a very delicate way. Representative Wolfmore.
I'm going to be confused. So right now, though, the way it stands, it's fully funded in 1 year, correct? Oh, I'm sorry. Right now, the way it stands, and I'm sorry I said I was a bit confused, but right now, the way it stands, it says fully funded in the 1 year, and maybe discussions later, but that's the way it stands right now, correct?
As it stands right now is the language on item number 3, which I think is in question. And it says the Budget Committee recommends the agency's enhancement of $10.8 million for salary increases for non-judge employees for fiscal year 2022, including the governor's recommendation, be retained. The Budget Committee notes the cost of phasing in these salary increases over 2 years beginning in fiscal year 2022 would be a total of $5.4 million per year. That is what we voted on, and that's what's in the budget.
I know I'm making you mad, Mr. Chair, but the second part was simply a note. It was
Correct.
not what.
But we are going to revisit this when we do the budget bill later on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? All right, Chairman Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that was fun. And I actually think it's a sound strategic move to go into the budget discussion, or more particularly into conference with a strong House position. So I commend the committee for its work this morning. With that, I will move the judicial branch budget for 2021 and 2022 as amended.
Second.
Committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Representative Helgerson. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. All right, so we were not able to get to the Judicial Council, Board of Tax Appeals, Board of Examiners and Fitting and Dispensing, and Optometry Board. So
Those are
Representative
exciting
Sutton,
ones,
you'll
too.
be-
You missed out on some real fun.
You'll be coming and revisiting us tomorrow morning, and then we're also going to be having the budget report outs for the Social Services Budget Committee by Chairman Carpenter. And then also tomorrow, we'll be having a hearing on House Bill 2188. So until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we're adjourned.